Hello friends, I'm Kayla, and we are rapidly approaching the end of 12 days of Lullamas. Now, I hope you saw my favorites video yesterday where I listed my 11 best books of 2025. Today, we're gonna look at the following 36 after that top 11. And I'm going to do a bracket ranking to figure out what, if there was a number 12th place, what that would be, what the number 13th and 14th and 15th would be. So here's how the bracket looks right now. I'm gonna pit books against each other, tell you what they're about, what I liked about them, and eventually we're gonna, get rid of books on each side and we're gonna end up with a winner. If you look in the top corner, you will see the 11 listed over there. They're obviously not going to be in the bracket, but they needed to be represented. A beautiful list of books. The reason I went with 36, not that anybody probably cares, just I want to explain because there are some 4 stars here. This is supposed to be a favorites bracket, so you'd imagine only 5 stars would be present. But to make a perfectly even bracket, it has to be a number of seeds that's like a power of 2. So 8, 16, 32, 64, and 16 didn't allow for all of my 4.5s and 5 stars, but 64, would have included even more 4 stars, but we would have been here for like 3 hours. So I feel like 32 is a good number, even though some of them we're going to be able to delete immediately because they're going to be pit against books that got a 5 when they're only a 4. But let's zoom in and begin the ranking. I don't have a ton of fantasy on my list, so I'm pairing those ones up. I think that makes sense. Also, the ratings of these are different. In the first seed is The Will of the Many by James Islington. This was my first 5-star of the entire year. In its simplest form, I would describe this as an academic training story full of secrets. There's a hierarchy in this world where you magically cede will to those above you in the pyramid of society. There's also a pyramid within the school environment, who holds the power, who doesn't. Our main character doesn't want too much to do with it, but he has reasons for attending this school and uncovering the secrets about the world. And then I put that against The Butcher of the Forest by Premi Muhammad. This is a horror folk fantasy. It's about a woman who's responsible for these young children who get lost in the woods, and they encounter kind of mythical creatures and animals, and they have to solve riddles to get out. It's a really short novella. It was very good, but it was only a 4.5, while The Will of the Many was a 5. The much longer fantasy is the one that's going to move on. Below that, I put Catabasis by R.F. Kuang versus Empire of Shadows by Jacqueline Benson. Catabasis has 2 students going into hell to save a professor, an advisor figure. Along the way, they contend with their relationship, the relationship they had with him, their relationship with academia. I thought it was all perfectly paced. All the things they had to encounter and work through were really interesting. And I would say the same thing about Empire of Shadows. I was interested the entire time. It's action focused and there's a relationship at the heart of it. This is historical. It's following a woman not allowed to take her rightful place as a respected archaeologist. She's pushed down by a lot of the men in her field, but comes across this information that would help her make waves in her department. She steals it essentially and is now on the run. There's a race to the jungle. She meets a man on the journey. Their dynamic is just elite. She is very smart and capable, and he's strong and worldly. And it was kind of the perfect pairing for me. I did give Catabasis a 4.25 and Empire of Shadows was a 4.5 at first, but then I bumped it up to a 5 when I realized how much I liked it. So that is the one that's gonna have to move on. I feel like the first round is the easiest and then it's gonna get more difficult to make decisions later, but we're continuing with romantasy vibes. Our next pairing is A Feather So Black by Lyra Celine and Paladin's Grace by T. Kingfisher. The first is a love triangle changeling fairy story. There's a woman tasked with retrieving her sister from the fairy world. She has an established relationship with this guy, but he's actually promised to aforementioned sister. When they find her, the main character then gets lured in by another guy in the fae world, and it's a love triangle. It's steamy. I had a good time with it. And then Paladin's Grace is also fun and steamy. Our male main character worked for this god. He lost the god and now he has no real purpose and needs to find something. He meets our main character who's a perfumist. There's a lot about her job. It felt very academic in nature. He tags along with everything that she's doing. Both are kind of convinced that the other couldn't possibly like them. And then there's this looming danger and a murderer in the woods. I didn't give either of these a full 5-star. Paladin's Grace was not enough fantasy plot. Like I wanted more pages, but it ticked all of my boxes. A Feather So Black also ticked all my boxes, but the detail was a little bit lacking. I think it was a 4.25 versus a 4.5. So reluctantly, Paladin's Grace is moving on. Then we're switching tones and we're getting into the general fiction section of the bracket. We have Cursed Daughters by Oyin Ken Braithwaite versus What Strange Paradise by Omar Al-Akkad. We have two different timelines in the first one, following women falling in love, dealing with heartbreak, just life difficulties. They are related, and people in the family say that the younger one is a reincarnation of the other. They call her by the wrong name. They set certain expectations upon her. And it's about finding her own voice. And it's very heartbreaking following both of their stories at the same time. Extremely well written. So was What Strange Paradise. This is like a more objective 5-star. Like, it's a novella that packs a really compelling narrative, is heavy on its emotional plot as we follow the only surviving refugee that has landed in a boat on an unnamed island. And there was a reveal in it that left me pretty gobsmacked. I did just have to give that one a 5. So it's moving on. The next two are Behold the Dreamers by Mbolo Mbui and Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. Behold the Dreamers, this was my second 5-star from this author, and I just love that she does kind of unexpected things with stories you might feel like the intent and message is clear from the beginning, but the plot itself stays really juicy. We have a married couple, and through business opportunities, they moved from Cameroon to America, the United States of America. They become intertwined with another couple. They're facing threats of deportation. They're relying on these jobs to keep them safe. And as they begin to be expected to keep secrets, and as the business world starts to crack, their relationship and dreams fracture at the same time. Martyr is also a really engaging, compelling story. It's a completely different vibe. It's far more insular, with a man and his thoughts grappling with his life's purpose. He interviews and researches people who've sacrificed things for a greater cause, and he is being led to a certain end. While there's a fun reveal, it did take away a little bit of my enjoyment because it felt kind of like a gimmick, and the book didn't realize that it didn't need the gimmick. It was so strong and unique on its own. So now I'm talking myself into moving Behold the Dreamers along. That does feel right. Like, Behold the Dreamers, I didn't spend a lot of time with it afterwards, but it really was really good. This is why I wasn't meant to be a book reviewer. It really was really good. That's my review for that book. Okay, well, let's move down to some sci-fi stuff. All This and More by Peng Shepherd and A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. All This and More, I don't think I would recommend this one super broadly, but that's not what this bracket is for. These types of stories where a character is re-experiencing portions of their life, they often get a huge range of ratings depending on how people like the lives that they explored and if it goes in a direction that they want. The reviews put me off of this book for years, but it was kind of perfect for me. I gave it a 4.5, so not technically perfect. The main character is on a reality show where she can experience how any one change in her life could change how her entire life now looks. It revolves primarily around these two relationships she's been in and which is the right one for her. And then A Psalm for the Wild Built, we have a character who becomes a tea monk. Could be like a support therapist type person. They discover they're burnt out, and there's discussions, great ones about guilt and passion. They encounter a robot in the story, and they teach them about the experience of living. It's soft and warm. Another Becky Chambers did Moving in Top 11. So this one was a 4.25, and All This and More was a 4.5. So I am going to move that along, though I think that would be an unpopular opinion amongst the general public. A couple other sci-fi. Immaculate Conception is in the horror genre too, and Death of the Author by Nadia Korafor feels more in the general fiction, but also Ling Ling Huang's is kind of general fiction in a lot of ways. So I don't know how to exactly label these, but I don't have to. With Immaculate Conception, the majority of this story is set in art school following two characters and the art that they create. It's kind of gross stuff. It's pushing the boundaries of what's acceptable with creation and self-expression. There is this technology that's invented throughout their life. We watch them learn about it, and it's basically that they can share a consciousness. One of them introduces the idea to the other, wants to participate, but much of the book is just spent watching their dynamic, like their jealousy, their inspiration. They're building family separately, not speaking for years, reconnecting. So I think the pace can be a little bit slow for people, but I absolutely loved it. Death of the Author also is slow. It is about a woman who's going to write the science fiction novel at the heart of it. We do get excerpts from that novel, and there's this technology that's really interesting for her to explore because she doesn't have use of her legs, and this technology allows her to live a better life. But as she gains fame and fortune and there are so many eyes on her, people start to think that she is trying to embody one of her characters, and there's a lot of critique surrounding her. The technology is really interesting. The novel inside the book is really interesting. There is something weird that this book is doing in the background, but at the heart of it, it is more of a lit fic story. I think you have to love a mundane kind of family and personal dynamic to love this one. It's not about you, it's about me. And I'm going to move Immaculate Conception along because Death of the Author was technically a 4.25. Immaculate Conception was a 4.5. I was really stingy with my 5 stars this year. I do recognize that. And now since we've gotten more into the horror realm with those, my proper horror picks that I'm pitting against each other are When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy and the Stephen Graham Jones bind up of Killer on the Road and The Babysitter Lives. When the Wolf Comes Home, I had to put on here. I had to pick a 4-star horror because I didn't have a lot of 4.5 and 5-star horrors of the year. This was just so inventive. It's really stuck in my mind. I think I'm probably bumping the rating up a little bit higher at this point. It starts out with a woman who encounters a young boy who's in danger and they take off on an adventure. It is plenty of horror, but there's also fairy tale vibes. There's like softness, but also proper scary scenes. And it's one of the most memorable reading experiences that I've had. With Killer on the Road and Babysitter Lives, I gave this technically a higher rating. And I do wax poetic about Stephen Graham Jones because I adore his stuff, but also at the same time, I feel like because there's so many people who just don't jive with his writing, I speak about his books in like a defensive manner that's like, this is why it's so good and this is why I love it so much. These are both really interesting horror stories. They are gruesome. They both star teenage girls who feel isolated, literally with a babysitter in the house, and the kids keep like disappearing and appearing within the house, and figuratively with a girl feeling trapped in her town and wants to get on the road and have a fresh start. I, in this moment, don't know which the right pick is because I know I gave When the Wolf Comes Home a 4 for a reason, but I think everybody since who's read it, and we're all just like enamored by it and talk about how you need to read it before you get spoiled for it. Like, I feel like I have a lot more passion than I did in the moment, but being a part of the 36 here means it was memorable to begin with. So I think I'm allowed to leave that there and move on to one that I know is correct, and that's a Stephen Graham Jones. And now we move over to the complete other side of the board, and we continue with horror, but it's a little more romantic-centric horror because we're then going to transition into proper romance because there's romance, just contemporary romance on my top 36, which is pretty beautiful. So The Possession of Alba Diaz by Isabel Cañas versus Elegy for the Undead by Matthew Vesely. The Possession of Alba Diaz, it's just such a great horror romance blend for me. So many authors do gothic stories and they create danger and tension within the relationship. In here, the relationship is kind of the reprieve from everything going on. This is historical. Alba is escaping expectations placed on her and also escaping literal demonic possession. Her love interest is swoon-worthy and the writing is stunning. Elegy for the Undead, lower plot for sure. This isn't a horror I would recommend broadly without explaining it thoroughly because the horror is kind of existential, much like the one that did make it to my top 11, Feast While You Can. This is relationship focused. There are zombies, there's an illness that's taking a loved one away, but it's also messy and not a straightforward romantic relationship. Like there's just a lot of moving parts for such a short book. It was really successful, but I have so much passion for Isabel Cañas, so that one is going to move along. Now, more romance. These kind of pair well together because The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood is speculative. It's one of those stories that I love where somebody gets a second chance at life, gets to experience maybe what their life could have looked like, gets to time travel in a way. And then female fantasy, while the core of it by Aman Hariri Kia is a contemporary romance, there is a story within the story, a fictional fantasy tale that the main character is reading. So it does feel a little bit fantastical. So Love of My Afterlife, there's a woman who dies and kind of for her own entertainment, her guardian angel, if you will, sends her back to the land of the living to find her soulmate, I guess, and just get another chance at life. It's lighthearted. It's a perfect vibe that I love. Reliving moments and learning lessons is my favorite thing to watch characters do, even though it was pretty like straightforward and kind of the exact story you expect it to be by the end. Female fantasy. One thing that I love is over-explained commentary. Very clear social critique. We have a woman who's obsessed with romance novels. She changed even the expectations of her love life and partners that she will accept because of books and the way that she sees fictional characters treat each other. But the genre isn't respected. Women reading it isn't respected. She hates that. She talks a lot about it. She ends up on this wackadoodle road trip to meet the man who inspired the hero in her favorite novel. And then she spends time with a guy she never thought would be her perfect companion, but is. They were both really nice stories. But Love of My Afterlife technically was the 5-star here. Female fantasy was like a 4.5. Moving down to proper contemporary romance, we have Till Summer Do Us Part by Megan Quinn and Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. Till Summer Do Us Part really worked for me because it was this silly scenario that has a woman in a fake marriage with a stranger to fit in with her coworkers. The lies start to stack up on each other. They end up at a very sexually focused couples retreat and have to have these very awkward but really sexy encounters. It was a proper rom-com. I was laughing out loud. I would love to see it adapted. It was so much fun. But Forget Me Not was kind of my perfect romance. It made me realize I was more into second chance romance than I realized. It's dual timeline, dual narration. In one, we see the beginning of their relationship. In another, years later, they do not speak and they're forced together as they're both wedding industry professionals. We get so much of her career, her day-to-day work stuff. I loved her as a character. There's so much tension between them, even though we get sex scenes in like every other chapter because they have this physical connection from years ago. It was a really satisfying read. It was not too heavy. It was heartfelt at the same time. Tonally, plot, relationship, like everything in here was perfect. It was a 5-star and I definitely have to move that on. Till Summer Do Us Part was fun. And actually there are more memorable steamy scenes in that one for me. But it was only a 4.5. Okay. And then we have to move on to relationship focused, but general fiction. I would call these. I wouldn't call these romance, but I don't know. I'm pairing up The Favorites by Lane Fargo and Deep Cuts by Holly Brickley. This one is a tough pairing because I didn't give either of these 5 stars, but they're both really memorable reads for me and they're both kind of similar as far as what the characters are dealing with and how messy the dynamics are. So The Favorites, I just loved reading. I remember having a great time reading it. It was documentary style, lots of interviews, a large cast of characters. It's following a couple from early in life to dealing with the pressures of being professional athletes. Their dynamic was so messy, but so incredibly passionate. You never really knew if they were going to end up together or even if you wanted them to. And then with Deep Cuts, I think this one has a little less mass appeal. Our main character is engaging in / obsessed with a relationship that we can see isn't really good for her. She's essentially a musician's muse, and when she becomes more than that, impacting his actual songwriting and making space for herself, he isn't really respecting her or giving her credit for that, but needs her. We see her pursuing other avenues, but mostly just like talking so passionately about the music that she loves in a way that made the book feel like nonfiction, which is why I think it's not landing for a lot of people. It feels kind of like essays that Holly Brickley wrote and just assigned them to a character, which is something that I just really loved. It felt so passionate, and I think this one stuck with me more. I think about it often, and it's the one that I would choose to reread, so I am going to move that one along. Then we have mystery thriller books. I just had to throw 2 in here for the representation because this is a genre that I read and I want to love more than I currently do. I had a lot of 5-star mystery thrillers this year, so I pulled 2 of them. Look in the Mirror by Catherine Steadman and The Appeal by Janice Hallett. Look in the Mirror, I picked this because even though I don't remember exactly what happened and what the reveals were in the book, I remember the feeling of reading it, and I remember being shocked by some of the things that happened, and that doesn't always happen for me in a mystery. It's set on an island that is owned by our main character's father, but she never knew that, I think, until his death. And then she goes to check it out, investigate the place. We're also in another timeline following a woman who's working for this rich family at the same house on the same island. And there's this room she's not supposed to enter. It's a shorter mystery. And it was one of those suspend your disbelief kind of over the top ones that I just remember having a good time with, but couldn't give it more than a 4-star. The appeal was a 4.25, so we already know, so I'm going to move along. It's told via correspondence, emails, texts. I don't fully remember everything. I feel like there was other various documents. There's a theater troupe putting on a play. There's also a family in the group going through a really difficult health situation, and they share that with everyone with the expectation that they will donate to their cause, put on events to help, etc. And we just get to know these people really well throughout their correspondence as they talk about the health matters, as they talk about the events they're planning, and as they also vie for different positions in the play and check in on the progress of the play. A lot of them are challenging how much the other people care about the cause. A lot of them are healthcare workers, and they go a little far with their determination to help a sick individual. And it was just so fun, and it was so engaging. This is something that's been in my tea brew for so long, and I'm really glad that it worked for me. So I am going to move the appeal on. Then all we have left is nonfiction. So I'm putting The Message by Ta-Nehisi Coates against One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against Us by Omar El-Akkad. If I hadn't read Perfect Victims at the end of the year and put that in my top 11, I could have easily seen one of these in the top 11. But that one kind of perfectly filled in the holes and gaps that these ones might have had. So, and they're far more like independently focused, like highlighting their own lives, their upbringing, their careers, etc. in relation to Palestine. That's what these two have in common. Ta-Nehisi Coates in his grapples with his relationship with media, especially in how he's contributed to misinformation regarding the occupation and genocide. There are many topics covered within it, but that is a bulk of it. And then One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This. He takes on Western media directly, the harm that has been caused, journalistic integrity, and the inner workings of news agencies. I think there's something they're both missing a little bit that does deserve critique, and I think that's something that Perfect Victims handled well, but they're both 5 stars. I think they both are very valid things for people to read. I would recommend them without any hesitancy, but I am going to move on. I'm going to move on One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This. Then I have 2 horror nonfictions, Your Favorite Scary Movie by Ashley Cullins and Why I Love Horror by Becky Siegel Spratford. Your Favorite Scary Movie is a really well-organized book that discusses the history of the Scream franchise from the beginning to current day. Every fun fact you might have already known, but packaged really well, and then also some interviews she's gotten with cast and crew that give little insight into facts, how it became so beloved, why we love it so much. And then Why I Love Horror is an essay collection from so many of my favorite horror authors. I geeked out discussing this with my besties in our book club discussion. Not every essay landed though, so I gave this like a 4.5. I loved getting insight into authors' favorite books, what introduced them to horror, why they have this passion for writing it, but then also the editor did a fantastic job with these introductions, recommendations if you loved the author. And it's so tough. Like, as you might see, there's no short stories on here because I never give those collections 5 stars, because if one story isn't perfect, it brings down the entire rating. I went into this bracket thinking I would move on Your Favorite Scary Movie, but I think I just have to respect the essays that were so perfect in Why I Love Horror and move that to the next bracket. And then finally, I have these 2 nonfictions. Black in Blues, How a Color Tells the Story of My People by Amani Perry, and Jane Austen's Bookshelf by Rebecca Romney. These are collections with a very specific theme. Black and Blues, it was just so interesting. I've said before, when smart people write books, taking the color blue from literature, historical documents, visual media, historical garments, knowledge, and gems and jewelry and cultural objects, just talking about blue in relation to the Black experience was such an inventive concept for an essay collection. I was pretty enamored by it. I ended up giving it 4 stars, and Jane Austen's Bookshelf was a 5. This was my final 5-star of the year in the final seed position. Through evidence and conjecture, Rebecca takes us through what did or likely did inspire Jane Austen's writing, the forgotten and underappreciated women in history, the hurdles they had to overcome in their life and career, the story stories they wrote, how they were received, and then the plots of Jane Austen novels alongside the author's take on each one of those novels and how she encountered all of them, and then her career in rare book dealing. It was like a 300-page book that felt like 700 pages. There was so much packed in. It was so incredibly well written, like flawlessly constructed. So I do have to move that one to the next round. So that's the end of round 1. We brought it from 32 books, my top 32, to now my top 16. Well, my top 16 honorable mentions. I have those 11 favorites. But now our matchups are going to be a little weirder because the genres are starting to be paired up against each other. We've got The Will of the Many versus Empire of Shadows. I already told you the plot of these. I told you what I liked about them. We just have to make some, quick decisions. I feel like, do you know the answer? I feel like the answer is Empire of Shadows. Like, I just loved the dynamic between these people. I did both of these question if they were 5 stars after I finished them. I had to think about it for a minute. And perhaps reading The Strength of the Few, the sequel to The Will of the Many, has skewed this a little bit for me, while I'm still really excited to continue in the other series. Yeah, I just think like the romantic dynamics just do a lot for me. So that's that. Speaking of romantic dynamics, we've got Paladin's Grace versus What Strange Paradise. Oh boy. Okay, I mean, Paladin's Grace was a 4.5. What Strange Paradise was a 5. It definitely packed more of an emotional punch. I think it was a better book because I gave it the 5, right? Like Paladin's Grace, there are critiques that I have of it. One Strange Paradise was just really solid. Moving to Behold the Dreamers and All This and More. Behold the Dreamers, again, was the 5-star here. There are critiques that I would have about All This and More. Also, it's a choose your own adventure. I didn't even mention that. It made for a really interesting novel, but it wasn't technically perfect. Then Immaculate Conception versus Killer on the Road and The Babysitter Lives. Okay, this one is a tough pairing because they have the same rating. They're both authors that I love. They're concepts that I love. I think Immaculate Conception is the right one because it was just so interesting. Both of those, though, are books that I feel like have a really wide mix of ratings. Like I participated in book club discussions for both of those, Immaculate Conception with Gabby, and it was such a mix of ratings in there, and a lot of people just weren't into it. And let's get back to this side where we have romance battling it out, The Possession of Alma Diaz and The Love of My Afterlife. A 4.5 is moving on. Like, just instantly, I was like, Isabel Cañas. It's Isabel Cañas. Should I have given that book a 5-star? Probably. I think it's her most overtly horror. The scenes were really frightening and then interesting, and all of the commentary was fantastic. Love of My Afterlife is so good, but it is a little more simplistic, I think, and just didn't leave as big of an impact. Okay, then we have Forget Me Not versus Deep Cuts. Forget Me Not, I clearly had more passion for. Deep Cuts, there's some a little bit questionable about it. And I'm just excited. We have a couple romances moving on to the next round, but now we have a thriller versus a nonfiction. One of them I gave a 5-star, so I am going to move that one along. I think even if I gave The Appeal 5 stars, I would be moving One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This to the next round. Then we have nonfiction. One I didn't even think would move to the next bracket, and one that there are 4 books on this bracket that I was swapping in and out for the top 11. Like, I knew I wanted to have a top 10. I kept adding in a top 11, but I couldn't really figure out which one I wanted. Jane Austen's Bookshelf is one that I kept considering, and because I read it and loved it so recently, I think a lot of you probably maybe expected that to be in my favorites, and this moment I haven't actually posted my favorites video yet. It's going up in just a minute, but I am gonna move that one on, but we'll see if it makes the next round. Now we have to go all the way back to here, where we now have a historical fantasy romance. It's like lamplight fantasy, so I learned what that word even meant this year, where there's just kind of spiritual objects. That's the fantastical nature of it. And What Strange Paradise, which was a really sad, heartbreaking story. This is where I got caught up last year in my bracket because obviously I enjoy reading a certain type of book more, but is it about the emotional impact? In this moment, I feel like I have to move over the thing that felt ooey gooey. Like I loved so many scenes in here. So Empire of Shadows is moving along. Then we have Behold the Dreamers and Immaculate Conception. This is actually a hard matchup, but Behold the Dreamers, it's been on my TBR for years, and once I read it, I was like, oh my god, I can't believe that I hadn't already read this. And I just don't think that I've really talked about either of these enough on my channel this year for you to really grasp how much I love them. But I am moving Behold the Dreamers to the next round. And then, oh my god, we're getting into the top 4 right now. This is crazy. The Possession of Alba Diaz and Forget Me Not. We have Possession of Alba Diaz up against another 5-star contemporary romance. Is it going to beat Forget Me Not? Can I have like 5 minutes to think about it? Yeah, it's Forget Me Not. I think it was the fact that I hadn't had a 5-star romance in so long that this one really sticks out to me, but I really did love it and I want to reread it. Then our 2 nonfictions, One Day versus Jane Austen's Bookshelf. Yeah, this seems like this happened to me last year. I remember this exact same thing happening where I was like, there's a book full of really important messages and really great things, and I'm going to choose something that's a little goofier. And that is what I'm doing. Jane Austen's Bookshelf, while they were both incredibly written, that one was just a feat. Like, reading that felt like inspirational. If I were to ever write nonfiction, I would want it to read like that. I would want it to have important messages. And, I think this one did. It was talking about women and the things that they have overcome and being pushed down and being owned by, their families and their husbands. That's what I'm doing. Okay. What the heck did I do here? I can't even remember. Empire of Shadows versus Behold the Dreamers. Okay, so an author, this is my first time reading them. Behold the Dreamers, an author that I have given 5 stars before. I did not see these being in my top 4. Like, this is not what I thought would happen. And Empire of Shadows being in my top 2 is definitely not what I thought would happen. But here we are. Then we have Forget Me Not versus Jane Austen's Bookshelf, which is 2 books that I was considering, and I was swapping in for that top 11 spot. I was thinking about it. I was considering it. And I don't know. Yeah, I do. I do know. It's Forget Me Not. Obviously, the nonfiction was fantastic, but I just had so much passion towards these 2 romantic relationships. And now this is my top 2. It does feel right that these are the top 2. And am I leaning towards one? I don't know. I think both of them are... Empire of Shadows has this whole history, this backstory, this fantasy. There's so much more of yearning and waiting, and the dynamic is just so fun and interesting. Forget Me Not, I just had a really good time reading, and it's exactly what I needed in the moment. Empire of Shadows, I had read other things, like The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love, that I was maybe comparing to as I was reading. And Forget Me Not feels good being my number 1 because the other top 11 are all different genres. Like, I don't have a contemporary romance. So of my top 12, how nice to have a contemporary romance represented. But that's not what my heart says. In this moment, my heart says Empire of Shadows by Jacqueline Benson. I just have such fond memories of this, and I have it in this list in my head of this recommendation perfect package of Emily Wilde and The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love and Veronica Speedwell and Empire of Shadows, where these are just these really fantastic dynamics that are perfect. Like, the banter is great, the men trust the women implicitly, but they're also like strong in their own right, but they're also obsessed. I'm terrified to continue on in the series because every time I've continued on in the other 3 I just mentioned, they didn't live up to the first book. And so I've picked up and put down the sequel multiple times, but I want to see these characters together again. I want to continue watching their dynamic. I think yeah, this is the right answer. I didn't even think Empire of Shadows would make the top 4. I really did love my time with it. I love how I came upon this book. It wasn't something on my radar, and I read it for a video, and I had such a good time. So this is my 12th spot. This is my now top 12 of the year. And while there is so many fantastic stories, moving, important topics, I was a lover girl in 2025, and that is the answer. That's it for me today, and I will see you in another video tomorrow. Bye!